This guy picked up a beautiful girl just as he was about to commit indecent acts. The other party suddenly began to twitch all over. The girl ran into the toilet and leaned over the bathtub to guzzle tap water. It turned out that the guy had picked up a zombie. The unlucky guy was counterattacked by the zombie girl, and bright red blood soaked the hotel bed sheets. When the girl woke up, she had lost her memory of biting people. A zombie virus that made people manic was secretly spreading in corners where everyone couldn't see. A few hours ago, Thailand's annual Songkran Festival Carnival began. Everyone went out to splash water to cool off. There were an endless stream of local and foreign tourists in Thailand, making this year's scene extremely lively. The staff had to set up iron railings to prohibit all vehicles from passing. The road closure would continue until the 15th of this month, and local police had also strengthened patrols. Just then, Sheriff John received an alarm from a hotel, and immediately went there with his partner. The front desk led them upstairs and explained that there had been strange noises in room 311 just now. He thought it was normal and didn't pay attention. However, after a while, there was a loud scream from a man. The front desk thought it sounded too scary, so he had to call the police. From the registration records, there was a man and a woman in the room, so he guessed that it should be a husband and wife quarreling. As soon as they opened the door of room 311, a strong smell of blood rushed to their faces. The ground was in a mess, covered with bloodstains. A man wearing a floral shirt was lying at the end of the bed and was already out of breath. The police initially judged that he died from a cut throat, but upon closer inspection, the wound was uneven, as if it had been bitten by someone. Just as John was wondering where the other person in the room had gone, faint sobs came from behind the cabinet. He held a pistol and approached carefully, only to find that the girl was hiding behind the cabinet crying. Her face, especially around her lips, was covered with blood. Through conversation, it was known that the two weren't husband and wife, but had met during the Songkran festival. The girl felt dizzy and heatstroke-like due to the hot weather, so the deceased, Jack, took her into the hotel to rest. After entering the room, the girl felt extremely thirsty, fell on the bed, and twitched all over because she was so thirsty. The girl ran to the bathroom and leaned over the bathtub to drink water. Jack thought it was strange and went to the bathroom to check on her condition. Unexpectedly, the girl's face suddenly changed, looking like a zombie. Next, the girl's memory was blurred. When she woke up, the man was already dead. The surveillance couldn't capture what was happening inside the room, but it did record the man's heart-wrenching screams. John took the backup of the surveillance video and was about to leave when he was stopped by a woman named Elisa. The other party claimed to be from the Special Control Unit and wanted to take over the case of room 311. She also asked John not to spread the case and hand over the backup of the surveillance video. John's first reaction was of course to refuse, but then he received a call from the chief. Elisa was confident because they had already bribed people at all levels, but John suddenly said to the person on the phone, "I'll bring the evidence to you right away, chief." After that, he swaggered out of the police station. In fact, the chief did ask him to hand over the videotape and on-site photos, but John wasn't willing to let go easily. The body had a bite mark on the neck that was deep enough to reach the main blood vessel, and there was also a strange unknown substance at the crime scene. He had an intuition that this case wasn't simple and wanted to investigate it deeply, but the chief was firm and didn't let John get involved. Just then, Elisa's superior came over and said that he appreciated John's logic in analyzing events, and asked if John was interested in joining them. This case wasn't a normal situation, and the Special Control Unit needed capable people to solve problems together. John just took out the business card and didn't give a clear answer. In a certain policewoman's home, she turned off the TV to prevent her father from watching those shocking murder news. Just as she was about to give a lecture, she heard a scream from the opposite building. There was a domestic violence man there who abused his wife every day. The policewoman couldn't stand by and do nothing, so she immediately rushed over and kicked the door open. Dealing with this middle-aged man covered in muscle, she didn't need to use her full strength at all. The policewoman handcuffed him on the spot. Seeing his daughter so impulsive, the father couldn't help but advise her, "If they haven't called the police yet, it's not a case. What if you suddenly rush over to make trouble and get into trouble?" The policewoman changed the subject and asked her father if he wanted to move away from this foul environment to enjoy a good retirement. Although the family's savings weren't enough, the policewoman felt that she had already started working. She could borrow money anyway. Her father, being of advanced age, should also enjoy a more comfortable life. Unfortunately, the two had completely different concepts. The father would rather live in a small apartment then be in debt, and he had been used to living here for more than 10 years. The helpless policewoman Alan had to give up in the evening. She met John at a roadside snack shop. The two were friends for many years, and poured out their hearts to each other as soon as they met. Alan complained about her father. John then voiced his doubts. Can an ordinary girl really bite a grown man to death? Alan said, it's not impossible. If you bite a fatal spot like the carotid artery, it might really be fatal. John joked, why don't you bite me and try it? Unexpectedly, Alan really moved closer when she heard this. John's heart rate soared instantly, but Alan quickly stepped back. John tried to suppress the throbbing in his heart. He reminded Alan, if someone gives you vitamins or any pills, never take them. John felt that the medicine he found at the scene was definitely not that simple, but he couldn't reveal the specific details to Alan. John was nervous because of the 311 case, and wanted to send Alan home himself. Although he knew she wasn't a weak woman, John just wanted to walk with her a little longer. Unfortunately, Alan didn't notice the feelings in his heart, and only felt that she was looked down upon. Early the next morning, Alan went to the Special Operations Unit for training. Just after finishing a round of target practice, she learned that a malicious attack had occurred nearby. The perpetrator was none other than the domestic violence man, who lived on the floor opposite Alan. At this point, he was holding his wife hostage with a knife, confronting a police officer before being fired for his mistakes. The domestic violence man was also a police officer, so he wanted to threaten the police station to rehire him. Alan first pretended to appease the criminal, saying, I have a friend who is about to be promoted to chief. If you want to be a police officer again, I can put in a good word for you. The domestic violence man really relaxed his vigilance when he heard this. Unexpectedly, the hostage woman took the opportunity to bite him. Alan quickly kicked away the domestic violence man's weapon, and pressed him to the ground, but male colleague Tap noticed something was wrong. After the abused woman escaped, Alan was distracted, and the domestic violence man broke free. Tap quickly stepped forward to help Alan up. The next second, both of them heard the domestic violence man scream. They went over and saw the domestic violence man being pinned to the ground and bitten by his wife. The woman had blood all over her face and a ferocious expression. Roaring and pouncing forward, Tap quickly pressed her against the stone pillar. Unexpectedly, the woman's strength surged, and she broke free immediately. Alan raised the butt of her gun and smashed it over. The woman fell to the ground and crawled away rapidly. Alan stood on a high place to look for traces of her, but the woman was moving quickly on all fours. Alan was accidentally pulled down from behind by the other party. In a crunch, Tap stepped in to help in time. He fired several shots at the woman, then took out handcuffs to subdue her. Shortly after, Elisa arrived at the scene with her team. Tap walked to the corner, and picked up the strange pill on the ground. The suspect in the 311 case had also come into contact with this drug. No one else noticed Tap's movement. At this point, Alan was questioning Elisa. You just mentioned infected people. May I ask what these people are infected with? Elisa not only didn't give a direct answer, but also noticed a scratch on the back of Alan's neck. Any open wound carried the risk of infection. Therefore, Elisa asked Alan to go back with them for an examination. If an infection was detected, she must undergo treatment. On the other side, the police station received another similar biting case. From the on-site photos, there was a bloodstain on the ground, very similar to the situation in 311. John remembered the unknown pill found at the hotel scene. He asked his partner if the test results were odd. However, the composition of this drug was so novel that it had never been heard of before. Even the testing agency had no conclusions. At the same time, Alan had to come to the center. She handed over all her weapons and communication devices, then followed Elisa into the laboratory to draw blood and collect tissue from the scratch on the back of her neck. After all the examinations, when she was ready to go home, Elisa took out a set of clothes and asked her to change and stay in the isolation room for 24 hours. Although Alan was angry, she had seen how infected people bite, so she was willing to cooperate, but she needed to call home first in case her father worried. But when Alan called, no one answered. She could only contact John and ask him to tell her father that she wouldn't be home tonight. John quickly asked if something had happened. Alan knew this matter had to be kept secret, so she lied that she was going to stay at a friend's house for a few days. As soon as John heard this, he guessed something was wrong. He knew all of Alan's friends, and there was no one she could stay with. After the call, Alan was taken to the isolation ward. Elisa explained that if no symptoms appeared that night, after one more examination tomorrow, she could be released. After saying that, she left with her team. Shortly after, a terrifying scream came from the next room. Only then did Alan notice the bloodstains on the wall that hadn't been cleaned up. She wondered how many infected people had been detained in this central building. The government hadn't leaked a single word. Late at night, screams from various rooms came one after another. making people extremely restless. After hanging up the phone, John went to meet his informant. He had previously asked the other party to investigate the identity of Elisa's superior. He learned that this person's name was Sack, director of the Special Control Unit, with the rank of staff officer. He was an important figure in the country. However, the informant didn't find out the origin of those pills, but it was inferred that Sack might know some inside information. The isolation period ended. Alan's blood test results were normal. No abnormal symptoms appeared within 24 hours. However, Sack didn't dare to take it lightly, so he ordered his subordinates to tail Alan for a period. After releasing her, to continue observing whether Alan would show symptoms, Elisa received the order to release her. When Alan was leaving, she passed by the next room. She saw Mary, the abused woman. She looked back to normal. Seeing the soldier beside her put down the keys to register, Alan took the opportunity to grab the keychain. She turned and ran into the isolation room, handcuffing the iron door. Then she opened Mary's room and went in to ask about her condition. When Mary saw someone enter, she kept repeating, "I'm so thirsty, give me water." Alan glanced at the table and found the entire water kettle was empty. At this point, John, carrying the business card Sack had given before, also arrived at the central building. He walked into Sack's office, took out the pill and asked, "What is this?" Sack said, "As long as you promise to work for us, you will naturally know what you want to know. But if you continue to delay, the number of infected people will only keep increasing." Over the past few days, the center had hardly been able to control the situation. The murder news Alan's father had seen earlier was actually a case of an infected person attacking people in the street. Sack had spent a lot of effort to temporarily suppress the truth, but these were only temporary solutions. The infection was spreading rapidly. For example, yesterday we arrested a special operations officer. John immediately guessed that Sack was referring to Alan.
เธอมีความเสี่ยงจะติดเชื้อตอนเนี้ยยังไม่มีใครรู้รายละเอียดของเชื้อตัวนี้เราถึงต้องการให้คุณมาช่วยงาน
At the same time, Alan was still trying to get clues from Mary about how she got infected. Unexpectedly, the scratch on her neck stimulated the bloodthirsty infected person. The next second, an alarm sounded throughout the center. The frenzied Mary struggled to pounce on Alan. Fortunately, Alan was a trained police officer. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Seeing Alan pinned to the ground by the infected person, Elisa wanted to help but didn't have the key. John also rushed to the scene upon hearing the alarm. The isolation room door was too sturdy to break down by force, so John shot the lock apart and rushed in, ordering Mary to stop, but the infected person was too crazed to listen to anything. In a crunch, John had to fire a shot. However, hitting her back had no effect on the zombie. John was about to shoot her in the head, but was immediately stopped by Alan. The SWAT team outside quickly entered to control Mary. John then took Alan to check for any scratches on her body. At this point, Sack could only briefly explain the situation. The center called this infection madness syndrome. The drug John found in 311 was called Nexus. It was currently known that the drug contained chemical components that affected nerves and hormones. Nexus also came in different color formulations. Sellers promoted various effects, claiming it could treat kidney disease and cancer, enhance physical strength, and delay aging, but no one knew that the drug could induce madness syndrome. In addition to drug transmission, the disease could also be transmitted through blood. Therefore, anyone bitten or scratched by an infected person, or exposed to their blood, was also at risk of infection. Currently, the government hadn't found any treatment. The only solution was to find the source and stop the spread. Now the drug had wider circulation channels. It was more accessible to ordinary people, leading to accelerated transmission. Therefore, Sack needed help. Although Alan didn't immediately agree, she kept thinking about Sack's words after returning home. The virus was now getting closer and closer to people's lives. Her father might be affected someday. She made up her mind to move with him and leave this messy community. And that night, she met with John and decided to accept Sack's proposal. On the one hand, she didn't want this terrible virus to spread. On the other hand, Sack had promised that as long as Alan investigated the organization that distributed the drug and found out their purposes and members, the center would agree to any request. In other words, Alan could ask for a high-end apartment and move with her father from the old community. Although John didn't trust Sack, he couldn't let Alan take the risk alone, so he agreed to help her investigate. On the other side, the results of Alan's second examination finally came out. It showed that there was no abnormality in her body, and her blood had a self-healing reaction. Of course, this probability was accidental and couldn't be concluded yet, but Sack was more determined to keep Alan. She might be the key to solving the problem. The next day, Alan and John returned to the center for investigation. They learned from Mary that several strangers had brought nutritional products to sell at the workplace. They claimed that taking them would make it less likely to get tired. and have more energy to work harder. Mary had taken them several times and found them effective, so she kept buying the drugs from that group. But that day, the domestic violence man came to ask her for money. Mary didn't want to give it, and a dispute occurred. After that, her memory became blurred. Mary has no memory of biting her husband to death, nor can she remember the face of the drug dealer. She only knows that the person always wears a black, unbranded tracksuit. To investigate this mysterious drug dealer, John accessed the surveillance footage from Mary's workplace, and indeed found footage of the drug dealer making a sale, but the image was too dim to see the face. Upon magnification, a blurry pattern on the drug dealer's shoulder could be seen.
พี่จำหน้าเขาไม่ได้แต่พี่จำได้ว่าเขาใส่ชุดวอร์มสีดำ
At this point, the camera inexplicably turned to Tap. Could it be that he was part of the drug trafficking organization? Just then, Tap indeed asked Alan, "How is the sister we saved that day?" Alan didn't reveal anything about the center, only saying that Mary had taken the medicine prescribed by the doctor, and was almost better. Tap also wanted to ask if Alan had received treatment, and whether they had given him any medicine. Alan waved her hand and said, "I'm fine," then took leave and left. He took John to look at a house, and a kind-hearted little girl led them to the sales center. This newly built building had complete public facilities, including a swimming pool, gym, and even a reading area. However, due to its popularity, only 3 vacant units remain now. Those who wanted to make a reservation needed to hurry. Alan had already chosen a location, and immediately signed the reservation contract. Afterward, the two walked around the neighborhood, seeing the convenience store clerk paying for an elderly person who had forgotten to bring money. Alan was very satisfied. This place must be perfect for Dad. Just then, someone from the police station called and sent him the image, found from the surveillance footage. John's face changed drastically after seeing it, and he was very awkward on the way back. Unable to hold back, Alan asked him what was going on and John had to explain. The police checked the surveillance and found that the drug dealer who traded with Mary entered the apartment building. "You just signed a contract for today." Alan was indeed devastated upon hearing this. John told her not to panic, suggesting they could just wait a while before moving in. "I'll help you catch that man, so there's no need to worry." Alan remembered that the staff at the sales office had mistaken them for a couple today. She thought the two could move in as a fake couple for undercover investigation, which would surely create opportunities to encounter the drug dealer. Although Alan proposed this idea for the sack of the act, John still couldn't suppress his excitement. An ambiguous atmosphere quietly developed, but unfortunately, no one took the initiative to voice their feelings. Alan bid farewell to John and was about to go home, when she was stopped by Elisa at the stairwell.
เราอยากให้คุณไปเก็บตัวอย่างเนื้อเยื่อที่แผล
ได้ค่ะเดี๋ยวพรุ่งนี้ฉันไปให้
The next day, Alan went to work as usual, and Tap came again to ask, where did the people from the center take Alan that day? Alan finally noticed something was wrong with Tap. Tap had to lift his shirt and confess, "I was also scratched that day." Alan was startled and quickly asked if he had any other symptoms, such as a bloodthirsty urge or sudden loss of self-control. Tap quickly shook his head, indicating he had no such symptoms. Since Alan was going for a sample test today anyway, he took Tap to the center as well. After learning the details, Elisa placed a glass of water on the table to observe Tap. Seeing that he showed no symptoms of thirst, she first handcuffed Tap in the laboratory to await deep pathogen screening, then took Alan for a wound sample. However, as soon as the two left the laboratory, Tap took a wire from his boot and easily unlocked the handcuffs. Then he sneaked into the quarantine area. Avoiding the surrounding patrolling soldiers, Tap saw an infected person being wheeled away, so he quietly followed and eventually entered a room where bodies were stored. Behind the plastic sheets were all the disposed of infected individuals. It turned out that this was the final fate of those infected patients who couldn't be cured. In fact, the scratch on Tap's arm was intentionally inflicted by himself. Tap's mother was also a severe infection case, but no one knew about it. He had been secretly searching for a way to treat his mother. Therefore, when he saw Elisa suggest that Alan go to the center for an examination that day, Tap guessed that these people might have a cure for the infection. Hence, he injured himself to deceive Alan, and took this opportunity to investigate the center's interior. Now it seemed there was no cure for the infection at all. Disappointed and angry, Tap immediately turned on his phone live stream to expose the existence of this morgue and the madness disease to the public. At first, those who watched the live stream thought it was a prank, but unexpectedly, the corpses tied to the iron racks soon began to wake up, squirm, and break free from their restraints to crawl toward Tap. All the terrifying sounds of biting were recorded in the video. This made all the viewers of the live stream realize that Tap wasn't lying. At this point, the alarm in the quarantine area sounded. By the time Alan rushed over in a panic, Tap was already surrounded by a horde of corpses. Opening the door now would only cause the virus to spread, so Elisa forbade anyone from opening it in despair. Alan could only watch through the glass, as Tap was bitten to death by the infected. Finally, Sack heard the alarm and rushed over, throwing a special bomb into the morgue, which resolved the crisis. No one knew that, like Tap, Sack also had a beloved family member infected by the virus. Unless they rooted out the drug trafficking gangs at the source, their lives wouldn't get back to normal. The above is the story of the latest episode of Happiness. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to it.